So today I'll be giving a little review on the Indian Scout Bobber 60. I got this bike around the first week of February, so I've had it about a month and a half now. Since then I've put in a little over 1,000 miles on this bike. This bike is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm just in love with it. I've been loving the rides in this thing, pretty much taking it out every day that I can. This winter here in Maryland. But I've changed up the bike in some ways. Nothing performance-wise. I'd say it's almost complete, but there are still a little more changes to be done. Once that's done, I'll be posting updated mods and accessories videos, so be sure to subscribe so you can check that out when it premieres. Okay, here we have the controls. I'm going to turn the bike on so you can see the gauge. We got the gear indicator there, tachometer for the RPMs, it gives you the time, speed, got the battery voltage, the mileage, odometer, and gives you a trip meter, only one. And then of course we have the neutral light and the turn signals here, and whenever the fuel is low, the fuel light will come on. And then we have the high beams, the engine, and the other ones that don't. Temperature. So right here we have the horn right here. Turn signals. Go left for left, right for right. Push it into cancel. High beams. And then back here we have a little trigger to change the gauge to the tachometer or the odometer or the trip meter, whatever you want to set it to. You can set it to using that, and you can also reset the times and whatnot with this. Over here we have the shut off switch, and then over here this little button is the starter. Put the key in right here. You turn clockwise. This headlight, it's the old lights, yellow color, but I still like it. It's very bright at night. High beams. Weighing in about 528 pounds dry and about 548 wet. The Indian Scout Bobber 60 is rocking a 60 cubic inch or 999cc liquid cooled V-twin. So this bike pumps out about 78 horsepower and about 65 foot-pounds of torque at 5,800 RPM. The tank, right here, the tank holds about 3.3 gallons of premium gas, 91 or above. And in the real world, it'll translate to about 110, 130 miles of range, depending on your fuel efficiency, around 36 miles per gallon. In the real world, this bike will probably give you a top speed of about 110, 115. I mean, I haven't actually gone full speed, but feeling how she rides and the power on this thing, I'm guessing it's around there. And I know the Indian Scout goes around 115, 120, so it's quite comfortable, honestly, and gives a, say, a pretty commanding stance because it's pretty low to the ground. It has only 5.1 inches of ground clearance and a 25.6 inch seat height. Because of this though, your lean angle is also slightly reduced at 31 degrees. For the brakes, we have one for each wheel. On the front we have a 298mm rotor with 2 piston calipers. On the rear we have also a 298mm rotor, but just 1 caliper. The tires are Pirelli Night Dragons, 130 by 90 in the front and 150 by 80 in the rear. They're both 16 inches by 3.5 inches. The suspension is not the greatest, but on the front we have around 4.7 inches of travel and 2.0 inches of travel in the rear, which, yeah, like I said, is not the greatest. She rides great, honestly. I mean, it's not only attractive, but it also performs really well. Very nimble for a cruiser bike. And the power delivery is smooth, but also can be quite aggressive once you get into the higher RPMs. But this bike goes, she rips. Especially compared to what I'm used to on a cruiser. I mean, my first cruiser bike was the Rebel 300, and that thing is really slow and buzzy. Speaking of buzzy, this bike gets a little buzzy in higher RPMs, but nothing too crazy. Doesn't make your hands feel weird or anything like that. It's definitely manageable. But when I'm on this thing, I feel like a ghost rider, especially when I'm dressed in all black. But it's also really comfortable to ride on besides the seat. But we'll get into that. Especially after switching the stock bars to the reduced reach handlebars right here. I mean, I'll be sitting upright. I don't experience any issues in my back or shoulders or anything when I ride. I feel like I could ride pretty much all day long if it called for it. But back to the seat right here. And before I got this bike, I heard so many complaints about it, and I thought nothing of it until I actually got the bike and experienced it for myself. So let me tell you, this stock seat isn't the most comfortable, and pretty much what people said is true. For me, though, it's not really a problem because I'm a smaller dude, and I don't necessarily have the biggest booty, but I still do tend to slide off the seat a little bit when I hit a bump or something like that. Speaking of bumps though, riding this thing is great. Like, when the road is great, the ride's great. But you hit a bumpy road or you hit a bump while going fast, you pretty much feel all of it aggressively. I mean, even when going slow. Like recently I was riding on the highway going about 70, hit a bump, felt like I was going to get ejected off my seat. But luckily, I didn't. I'm here. But it can get kind of scary at fast speeds, so you gotta be careful, of course. But that's expected of bikes and high speeds and bumps. When you ride a motorcycle, you can expect to have to deal with these types of things. This lean angle also isn't the greatest. Well, not this necessarily, but when you're riding and you hit those very sharp turns. But I mean, I usually have no problems with scraping pegs. I say usually because when I first got the bike, I scraped it twice going in too hot, but you know, you learn and you adapt. You're not looking down at the pegs every turn, you know, and actually enjoying every twist and turn that you come across. But if you've been a rider for some time or know about racing, you know, you can always change how you go into the turns. You can vary your speed, have the time of your life, you know. Getting into the wheelbase here. Bike has a long wheelbase like most cruiser bikes, but I'd say it's fairly easy to do low-speed maneuvers on this bike. It only goes about 10-15 miles, solely relying on the motion and the friction zone. Zero throttle. So if you let out the clutch slowly all the way, it will only reach about 10-15 tops. Yep. And the forward controls on this bike really threw me off in the beginning because before this one I had 3 bikes and they all had mid controls. But after trying it was alright. Yeah, actually after a day or two I got used to them and I actually preferred them over the mid controls now. Yep, riding on the highways for me has been no problem, especially with the addition of this fairing. At first I had a windshield, but then I added a full fairing for the front for a little bit more wind protection. Although without it, I mean, she still rides great. But you'll of course feel the wind, and you'll feel it on your body, your helmet. So that resistance could eventually tire you. You know, I don't want that. I'm tired of fighting the wind. That's why I always add a windshield or fairing of some kind to my bikes. I was riding on the highway in 20 miles per hour wind actually the other day, and I felt really planted and stable. Probably because the bike is so low to the ground, so the wind really isn't a problem on this bike unless you get crazy wind speeds and gusts, I would say. I've even ridden with the passenger here and it felt almost normal. The passenger was only about 120 pounds, but still I felt like I was in control of the bike. You got the seat here and pegs. Put that one down too. Only other time I had a passenger on my bike was with a sport bike, and that just really felt uncomfortable. I felt like all the weight was going to the handlebars and on me, but this bike just feels way more balanced and roomy, and the weight's more distributed along the bike, and you know, it just feels way better. Kind of feels like I'm riding alone. Overall, I'd say this bike is a great starter, big bike with enough power to give you satisfaction for a very long time. You know, she handles really great. She handles really well, and I mean, if you get one, you'll see what I'm talking about. You definitely won't grow out of this bike easily. So far, I mean, I've loved every mile I've put on this thing, and every mile I put on it, I feel like a badass. I would say this bike is more for someone getting into their second or third bike, though. Probably don't want to start on this bike because it is pretty powerful, and it's a pretty big bike for a starter. But yeah, that's it for this 1,000-mile review on the Indian Scout Bobber 60.